Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Musical Talk. I'm Thos, and I think Hamilton might be more appealing to me if it was rather more about Formula One's best driver. And before you write, I am aware that there was a musical up at this year's Edinburgh Festival Fringe called Hamilton (Lewis). So I'm not the first one with that gag. Well, thank you for coming back to Musical Talk. As you may remember, we're looking at the creation of a brand new original cast album, one of the subjects we haven't really tackled here on Musical Talk before, so I'm very excited to share it with you. The album is, of course, The Quentin Dentin Show, which features the wonderful Luke Lane as Quentin Dentin. He's so close to the part now and really understands the character of Quentin Dentin that he can actually ad-lib in character. But it was as Luke Lane that I had a wonderful, long conversation with him about his career and his involvement with the Quentin Dentin Show. In today's episode, we're going to be hearing the second part of that, where we talk specifically about the Quentin Dentin Show in 2017 and the production of the Tristan Bates Theatre in the middle of London, and of course the original cast recording, which is about to be released on the 14th of September. That's in just a few days' time. And it's a fascinating insight into how that album was created from the point of view of the lead singer. I should say I've heard the album and it is absolutely top-notch. I can't wait for you to hear it. And it's not just me getting excited. It really has caused a buzz, because Luke was interviewed on the Elaine Page radio programme on BBC Radio 2 only a few weeks ago. In Britain, that counts as pretty good coverage for a musical. And so what better way of continuing that excitement, that buzz, that sense of anticipation for the album than listening to the second part of our wonderful conversation with Luke Lane. Musical Talk. Well, Luke, thank you very much for joining me again.
Happy to be here.
There is so much meat on the Quentin Dentin bone that we haven't even started on yet. So I think in real terms we've sort of mapped the development from your engagement with Quentin, and we've sort of got to the 2017 production, which is where I think our starting point will be for today. And even in our last conversation, you were touching on the fact that actually it wasn't just a reworking, it was a development of the show, a reiteration, and therefore some of the spots and the points which you had successfully managed in for 2016 had to be re-navigated, might be the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
So what was the most obvious change to the story as you saw it, either overall or in the sense of Quentin and his character? You know, what was your grappling point? Because in a way it's really hard, it seems to me, to be an actor who's already established in a show and then that gets reiterated but is changed. You know, it's unlearning and relearning, and what do you let go and what don't you let go? Or do you start again from scratch?
Part of me would love to say I start from scratch with everything, but that's an absolute lie.
But at least you've said it. So.
Yeah, I've said it. You can edit the rest of it out. Yeah, so the show had changed, right? The show was longer, and by necessity there were things that couldn't have been looked into when it was a shorter version that now were crying out to be looked into. And
so breathing space in a way.
Breathing space, but also just going, okay, like we were saying before, that where things are purposefully ambiguous and where things are just ambiguous because we haven't really given them much thought. And that, you know, especially a character like Quentin, which is so central to the show and never leaves.
Sort of named after him.
Kind of. Or is he named after it? But
and you must show me your chicken and egg arrangements.
So there was a lot to be grappling with there. Why is he there? And so one of my favourite changes to it was that we were trying to deal with Quentin's relationship with the programme, the reason that Quentin's there, and what that allowed for was, again, further development into Quentin, making him less of a sort of grotesque or caricature, and seeing why he was doing these things. As we were saying in the last interview, the idea of the audience have to get on board with them, let's make that as easy as possible, and let's see where Quentin is. And it forced me to think a little bit more as well, rather than going, let's make the show really entertaining.
Yeah.
Because when we were doing it late night, an hour and 15, one act, it's all about punch and bang for your buck, and let's go and let's have a great time, and the audiences loved it.
And respond to it in kind.
Exactly.
Yeah. But if you want a little bit more empathy or poignancy, then you've got to.
And if you want to make the show last longer,
yes,
quite frankly, that would be a lot to sit through. If it was all the same octane as it was when it was an hour for 2.5 hours, that's a lot to ask of an audience. Not saying it can't be done, but I would say, and also I'd be dead.
One night only.
Yeah, not that stretching it over 2 hours and playing with the octane in it meant that I didn't almost kill myself every night, but
you had different beats.
Yeah, there was more to play with, and so there was also slightly different creative elements in the show. We had a new director, and that was great because it was demanding that we re-look at things that otherwise, I know I'm guilty, I'll happily put my hands up, but there were things that I absolutely took for granted that I didn't really think about because that scene was working.
Yeah.
So the scene was working, and suddenly I'm being asked a question, well, why are you doing that? And the answer was probably, more than likely, because I was showing off. More than likely, it was something like that. It was because I think the audience would like it. Well, that's all well and good, and the audience are supposed to be entertained, but not if it actually takes you out of the show. Yeah,
you've got to be plugged into the holistic whole, he said, tautologically, of the piece, and not just the individual elements, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yes. It's not about just the audience being shown lots of things and look over here, because I'm not actually dealing with what's going on in the play. And readjusting that and going, no, you have to look at that and you have to tell us why. And if you can't justify it, then it has no business, which I love. That's when you see something great, it's because all that work has been done. And so forcing yourself out of any kind of habitual things that I do because I as Luke, to do that, or I thought it sounded nice, or I thought that was a funny joke, or I thought that was a good look to the audience. If it has no place in there, put it back in your back pocket and see if you can put it somewhere else that makes sense.
But you are still being creative, and that was permitted. It was just there are some things where the parameters and the borders are changed ever so slightly.
And at no point was it don't do that.
No.
It was
justify.
Why are you doing that?
Yes.
And I like that. That's the wonderful thing about being in a rehearsal room. It's why it's so much fun and why it's exhausting, but it's really you feel so enamored by the whole thing, and you just get a big boost of energy the entire process. That's certainly my feeling of it, because you're constantly it's like playing tennis or something with someone, and you're constantly trying to give them your best shots. And
it's also the privilege of navigation, isn't it? That you're the first person to be taking that character into that area because no one's ever done it before, and here you are in a brand new position, and a brand new iteration, etc., etc. You've got to find the way, and no one's ever going to make sure all the steps are never always going to be right on a first journey.
No, and nor should they be. And
no, quite.
Doing the wrong thing is great because then
yes,
that's something I shouldn't try, or not even shouldn't try. That's just something that can fall by the wayside. But now I've done it, so I don't get the feeling 5 weeks into the run. I've always thought about doing this one. Let's see if it works.
Yeah. So the 2017 one, as I say, it's not quite a reboot, but there is a real element of reinvestigation and re-navigation across the whole piece. What for you then was the biggest change in Quentin? I mean, you've already half explained that, but saying it's developing the inner side of Quentin.
Yeah.
Was that hard to add to Quentin from your previous interpretation? I suppose what I'm saying is because, we've been bandering the word grotesque, not grotesque, around a little bit.
Yeah.
He's become increasingly less grotesque.
Yeah.
Or less a-grotesque as he's developed and new iterations. But these are new elements of personality and character being added to an established core, even if you're twisting and turning on your sixpence to make that all work.
Yeah.
Is it just... I suppose what I'm very badly trying to say is, was any of this a surprise to you? Is Quentin still... here we are in 2018. Is Quentin still surprising you?
Yeah. No, definitely. Because I think we may have had this conversation before the 2017 version, or maybe during, and it was that I wouldn't have loved the idea of just rehashing what had already happened. That it was great, and don't get me wrong, I probably would have done it if that was what was asked, but it's
lovely,
far more interesting to be re-looking and re-examining what it was that you've done and how that can be moved forward. And because even over the run of something, you find new things, and obviously show one in previews is going to be different to the first time you open the show. And that was really interesting. For Quentin, it was just this element of how he fits into how we're melding these worlds, and being in a different space as well really helped, because I certainly took for granted the idea that we were in that space above the arts, and that was my playground.
Yeah.
And suddenly when you open this out, and suddenly you have raked seating on two sides, and there's twice the audience inside.
At the Tristan Bates.
At the Tristan Bates, yeah. And you're going up and down, and you have a set, and it all becomes
a different world.
Just the manifestation of the world becomes far more real, and you have other things to play with, and so that demands an extra bit of attention, also focus to it, because it has to be longer. That was the biggest thing that I kept on thinking about, was how do you colour this when you've already been used to. It's not just that you've taken one show and just stretched it. There were things added into the show, but for me, what that meant was I wasn't just keeping everything in the same place, because there were new songs, there was new dynamics to it. Other things happened with Quentin that didn't happen the first time. Songs have been changed, and you're then going, okay, well, why don't we... Some of the stuff worked, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't, fantastic, because if it doesn't work now, the odds are it probably didn't really work before. It was just we were able to get over it by sheer... brio, charm, and just a couple of high notes.
Well, a new light from a new angle will actually show you some weaknesses or some strengths. Yes, you're quite right.
Absolutely. So that was probably, for Quentin, so much of it, the character itself, in terms of, that did make sense to me in terms of what Quentin was. But then to have these other challenges and to really kind of round that out and demand of me in creating a character to reassess what it was and how he felt, what the tension was for him.
Yes.
How important this all was for him. And that's great to look at and say, right, this is what it is, and it's life or death. It's an absolute, this has to happen.
It's existential for him.
Exactly. It really
and
is. which not saying that wasn't there necessarily above the arts, but it certainly wasn't there to anywhere near the same extent once the show was lengthened out.
It's really interesting you use the word tension. And I think that's, that tension and anxiety is a very clear driver of his character and personality, because he's also, he misses a great deal of subtlety, doesn't he? I mean, he is on the earth and he is with people from Earth, but he does not quite get how things work. He's ultimately it isn't fascism if it's good for you. It's one of the lyrics. It's a brilliant lyric, and of course it sums up his philosophy. He thinks he's trying to do the right thing, but he is hammering people into a hole to make it happen. There's not. He doesn't have a great deal of empathy. He's a man who lives. His character almost is. It's like he's read some handbooks on what it is to be human.
Absolutely, he's been uploaded with these different things that he can do to help in quotation marks. Sorry, I realised I was doing that while it was being recorded. So having this helping idea of join my philosophy and my way of life and join the program, and therefore you will be happy. I can do this for you. All you have to do is do exactly what I say and forget everything you know before. Submit completely. And that fascist element is great. It's fun to play, but also it gives the show that energy throughout.
And it's frequently mentioned as well. This is where Henry's lyrics are so wonderful. There's in the rock and roll number, if you like, the one that leads to the harsh truths. There is a reference to goose stepping is just sort of thrown in as a lyrical throwaway, and then there's triumph of the will. And then it's the overt comment on fascism. So
he's a clever man, is our Henry.
He's
Carpenter.
A golden threader.
The blame game is that one, and that was a new one for the Tristan Bates, and I'll tell you what, hearing that for the first time and going, what are we supposed to do here? Was daunting, but ultimately it was was an audience favourite as well, that song. I didn't think I would be capable of sweating more at that point in the show, and then we put in that choreography and what was going to happen there. And I was proven wrong.
Well, as Quentin, you get to sing that faster and faster and faster, don't you? It's a kind of, well, to my ear, it sounds 50s. It's a kind of rock and roll number in that sense. It has and you are ostensibly singing out the dance motions for the dance floor. Clap your hands, belly ache, all the bits and pieces like that. But you do it faster and faster and faster, and it's almost a song that sort of is trying to avoid just by the skin of its teeth or the seat of its pants, avoiding tripping over.
Yes.
So it sounds like a stage triumph. I mean, it was a stage triumph, but it's a great song. You get that just from the lyric and the recording.
Yeah, and this is the thing as well. So for the show itself, for coming to the theatre and seeing the show, is a great, hopefully is a great experience. But for the album, and it's the same idea, is that idea of the couple that are in the Nat and Keith characters are a proxy for, it could be anyone, take it from the audience.
They're everyman characters.
Or
ostensibly, anyway.
And Quentin goes out into the audience. It is interactive in many ways, but they're the proxy. They're what we're using. But actually, at any point in the show, what you'd love is the idea of just grabbing an audience member and shoving them in that couch, and suddenly the show is about them.
Yes, there is there's an edge of the seats enjoyment aspect for the audience too. Yeah, because there are fourth wall breaking moments.
100%.
It would not be in a comfortable environment to be dragged onto stage, I think, with Quentin when he's at full pelt. Another thing that happened in the 17 production is the fact that you had one or two new cast members. Did that change the dynamic of the show? I mean, it must do in some senses.
Yeah. I mean, it was great. And all the cast that I've worked with in Quentin have been honestly a joy to work with. Really, there haven't been any. Unfortunately, I don't have. That would be great if suddenly I was like, do you know who was a real?
Yes.
But no, everyone was wonderful. There were other demands on the characters as well. Things changed, right? So characters had songs that had never had songs before. Characters moved in a different way, or other things were needed of them. So having people coming on to the show who were able to do all those different kinds of things just meant that it gave it another oomph, another buzz, and having other people to put stuff in the mix was really helpful.
Yes, it's a new flavour.
It's a new flavour completely. I'm still in contact with most of the people from both. Really, I was texting Shauna just the other day.
Fair enough. That's our Nat, Shauna Riley.
Yeah.
So, let us talk briefly before we move on to the album then, because the 2017 version seemed to me to be a great success, but I remember speaking to Henry and Hannah when I went to see it, and I saw it twice. And I introduced a friend who adored it, by the way, and he went to see it twice as well. Once without me, I should say. I think he got the last ticket on the last night. He was going to take friends, and then there was only one ticket left, so he went on his own.
There you
go.
He
was
was
that desperate to go.
That was a good night.
But he adores the show now. But I remember Hannah and Henry saying to me that they realised as that production developed that there was still another iteration at least one more iteration of Quentin to be done.
Yeah.
Did you get a sense of that?
Definitely. Yeah, I guess so. It was fairly all-consuming as well. That in terms of what I had to do in the show. Just because it's, for anyone, I think, maybe it's just me and my limitations, but it was a lot to be contending with every night, 8 shows a week. So
you're barely off the stage. I mean, a tiny bit at the beginning. And then
there's two scenes where Quentin isn't there. So it's 2 hours and 15 minutes of playtime and 2 hours where Quentin is going. And obviously being in a black box theatre during a heat wave in the middle of the summer, in a suit, maybe not the most...
Comfy?
Comfy or dry.
Yes.
But...
You've waterproofed your turn-ups, haven't you? So and now actors guttering.
Absolutely, yeah. So in terms of looking at further development of the show, I mean, that's not necessarily my remit in any case. But there are definitely things where you kind of go, oh, I wonder if how this would play out, Is this... Did we do that? I've never seen the show.
Yes, of course.
Which is key. I've never seen the show in any
so
way.
Yes.
So that's difficult for me to be like, what needs stretching, what needs... I can only do it for my ideas of Quentin. And when new things would be thrown at that, then that would give you the impetus to go, let's look into here. But without that, it's difficult. Now, that being said, having this album come out, it really does. It's very different.
Yes.
So, and it's a very different experience, even though the songs are the songs that we did.
It's still the score.
It's still the score, absolutely. But it has this other aspect to it. And I think part of that is because, as I was saying, that Nat and Keith, the couple in the show, are used as a proxy for any audience member. Then when suddenly you have that on your phone or, you know, in your car, then there is nothing dividing you. You are listening to it, and Quentin is singing to you, and all of these ideas of Come Along With Us is to you directly. So it's really just hitting in home, or certainly that was the intention, and that's what the feedback I've gotten from it. That doesn't necessarily mean that I feel that, because I'm also having to listen to the album a few times before I stop going, oh, I did that. Oh, interesting. I don't remember. Oh, is that the way? Oh, okay. That's, you know, because it's me listening to me.
Yes, of course. It's analysis for you first, rather than engagement as an audience.
Yeah.
I'd just like briefly to finish off on the 2017 before we move on to the album. Yeah. And once again, there's two elements. The first is, in that 2017 version, did the audience teach you anything, or because the audience are always, you know, they're different every night. Mm-hmm. I don't just mean physically; they will respond differently every night. Yeah. But audiences also find things or discard things in a way that's quite often surprising for the creatives and the actors and you know, everyone involved in it. Was there anything consistently that the audience was sort of letting you know was good, bad, indifferent? You know, what came out of audience responses?
Yeah, it was, you know, especially for this kind of show, audience reaction is key.
Yes.
Particularly for the character that I was playing, because so much of it is out in the audience, directed to the audience. It's at no point is it lazy theatre watching, because you don't.
This is not a passive audience show.
No, and I don't. And again, personally, I don't love passive audience play. I don't think go watch TV. That's passive. Right. You know, that's fine. You're going to theatre for something else, and I enjoy that. I enjoy having someone really go in to make me feel something or react in some certain way and ask something of me. You know, don't dumb down to your audience. Don't make them seem stupid. Don't assume they're going to be. And that sort of play with the audience is absolutely key. So the previews were, with this kind of show, it's odd, it's quirky, it's kooky, it's all the rest. Until you get it in front of an audience, that's you don't know what's going on. We had the benefit of having had done it the year before, obviously, so there were things that I thought that should work because it worked before. So if that doesn't land, it's because we've jumped a step or something like that. So the blame game that we were talking about before, I honestly had no idea how that was going to go down for an audience. It was partially because it was very intense to do, so then how it's going to be perceived, I couldn't imagine. You know,
it's a packed episode, isn't it, as it were? And a pivotal one for Quentin as well.
Yeah, it's a really important thing, so it has to work. And it wasn't that I didn't have faith in what we were doing, it was just that I could in no way envisage what they were watching, which is a scary thing for a performer to be in because and then the first night we did it went down gangbusters, and that was thank God as well, because we were exhausted by it. So that really allowed us a huge breathing space and to go, right, the audience like that, but this needed to hit that and then you start playing with levels of, well, we really, you know, the crescendo of this part of the show was here, and we were expecting it to be here, but do we need to change that? Is that important? Is that, actually, if it's there, then what happens next could be this.
And so the audience think the profile of the show is slightly different to what you as the creative think. Does that matter? Yes.
That's a really interesting point. And how do you drive it?
Yeah. Should it be shoehorned into a preconceived idea, or should it just be allowed to run?
Yeah, and Quentin has to have an element of control of what's going on, because if, you know, I was very conscious of, not that I'm competing with the audience or anything like that, but they're the engine, Quentin's the driver.
Yes.
So if it's driven badly, then the audience will kind of miss what's going on, or just completely run out of control. And so it was a lot of audience play. It was a lot of the best nights of Quentin, which happened more and more frequently as the run went on. For me, was when I could feel like I knew what the audience. I knew that the audience were going to react to the next bit in this
So
way.
you're in tune with your audience, in fact.
Yeah, and doing that, I mean, doing it 8 shows a week
Will help.
You have to get used to it, and then you have to kind of see one audience off another, and you go, well, this audience, they reacted really well to this, not so well to this, and that usually means that the next thing needs a little bit more massaging for it to work, or vice versa. But that only comes, obviously, through basically triage.
Yes.
That you have to just have gone through it and through it and through it, and then you realise, okay, this is how we're going to play this off. And that was what was wonderful about the cast as well, is that we were able to play off each other.
Intuitively, presumably.
Yeah, that we got on really well. And so you can play, and being backstage and being behind that set and getting ready, pumping ourselves up to go on, see what we were going to be faced with, whose legs were going to be sticking out into the middle of the stage. At one point, a lovely, very sweet older lady, I'm sure, something fell off the radio that we were using. No problem, just a little
knob or
something. Yeah, that didn't make any difference. Probably glued on in the first place, didn't actually work on the radio. It fell off, and I walked on stage, and I saw it fall off. That's fine.
Yeah.
And I walked to one point on stage, turned around to find that lady from the front row on her hands and knees on the stage, picking the piece up to move it out of the way. Later to find out that the reason she did it, she was just terrified that someone would fall. She was just trying to be helpful.
Yes.
She was, but that kind of thing, you're never going to be able.
No.
I turned around to expect to face Max Panks as Keith, and then suddenly there's an older lady just on the stage, and you have to engage with it and go on, and those kinds of things are wonderful, and it keeps the show so alive.
It's the fourth wall being broken in the wrong direction. It's normally you as the cast will come out into the audience and bring us in some way. The idea that we are invading your space.
Yeah, but I think that was the design of it, though. That was the design of the set. That was the design of everything. That we're here, but the lights are going to be on in the audience. In the show, the lights switch on to the audience, and it's hello. Yeah. I'm talking directly to you. Yeah. It's not this idea that I'm just doing a soliloquy out to you, and you happen to be listening into my innermost thoughts. No, I'm looking you in the eye, and I'm talking to you directly. I'm sitting on your lap. I'm I'm there with you. So it was fun because it meant that someone feeling that they could do that meant that we had done our job in the first instance.
So let us move on to the 2018 iteration, which is the album.
Yeah.
I've had the privilege of hearing it. It is fantastic. And it is another step on, isn't it? But it isn't the first time you've recorded the songs, because I think for the 2016 version, you certainly recorded Quentin's songs, because I've heard a number of those as well. But there's a significant difference in the feel. In fact, there's been a significant difference in the feel of the musical underlay, for want of a better statement, in all the iterations, because Henry has had one of his bands in previously, then he's had he and a couple of other colleagues who are not in that band but who have provided the music later on. And he has a very particular kind of I know he won't mind me saying this, he's a great fan of David Bowie and Devo, and some of those earlier iterations are much more in that sense, and it's moved away from that. So what are your recollections of the 2016 recording, which was not an album recording, it was just a set of recordings, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was kind of demo recordings for 2016. And we did so we must have finished the show just before the summer, I want to say. We did it in April or May was when it was on. And then, I know because I went off and did a summer season of Shakespeare, and then came back.
Your other love.
Yes, exactly. And came back to do a couple of recordings, which was just so much fun. Because we didn't, there was no plans for Quentin to be going anywhere else. I mean, Hannah Elsie, the producer, had her... she was working away as she tirelessly does. So she might have known far more than I did. But I just thought, what a great thing. We're going to record some of these tracks in a studio.
For art's sake.
Yes, studio in East London. Yeah, I'll go. With Mickey Howard, who was our guitarist in every production I've been involved in. There with Henry and a studio producer in East London, just banging out a couple of, I think we did 3 tracks. And if for nothing, that would have been a great memento.
Yes.
Obviously it was going to be used to show people that didn't get to see the show, etc., etc. But it was really fun, and it was kind of not bare bones, but it was kind of, this is us doing it, here's the band,
it's our record,
and we're just kind of almost pretty much exactly the way we had done it previously. We're going to get this down to show people, and that was a different experience to what we then did for the whole album.
So can I ask, was that earlier recording? By the way, I've drooled over your recording of Numbers so often. It's one of my all-time favourite songs and one of my all-time favourite performances. So have a star for that.
Thank you very much.
But I'm guessing that, as you say, the theory behind it was to just lay down a few of the tracks as would have been heard in the show in 2016. And to a degree, more or less in 2017 as well. So not actually speech marks directed.
No. It was about the music. It was about just, Henry slaved over the score and wrote a great one. And let's pick 3 songs that went down really well, that we love doing, that have interesting elements to them, that are indicative of the show, and let's get them down and let's play around and see. But it wasn't too much. There wasn't all that much play with it, really. We just got in there and did it.
Yes.
Right? I remember I was filming something that day, and I wrapped filming of some English language thing, and I went straight to the recording session, and Mickey, Archie and Henry had all put down their parts.
Oh, you were overlay singing.
I was overlay singing at the end, and so it was just kind of come in and do it. Great, let's do it again. Henry saying, "Oh, can you try this?" Probably something that I had not done that he asked me to do in the show as well. But as we're going to get it down, can you say the words correctly? Oh yeah, okay, fine. But yeah, and
it's lemons, not melons.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. But yeah, so we just kind of went for it and had them down and allowed ourselves to just enjoy it, and hopefully whoever needed to hear the show, if we're ever going to do it again, could get that flavour from those.
Whereas the 2018 is a proper cast recording.
Yep.
And I suppose my first question on that is, how much does it feel like a new iteration of a show to you, and how much does it feel like a directed version of a show? Because choice, and the reason I ask that question is because choices have to be made when one makes a cast recording. The easiest way of making a cast recording is just to release the live soundtrack with audience responses, whatever at all. But they're always slightly scruffy.
Mm-hmm.
They're fine. Do you include dialogue? What is there a need to be increasingly heightened on an audio-only version? Are you trying to tell a story so that the thing works in its own sort of poetic sense? These are questions which presumably Henry and Paul, who are the producers of the album, have been wrestling with.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get a sense of that? Did they release any of that information to you? How far were you directed? So that's a broad question. I'm sorry to have it so many
that's fine.
fingers on
fine.
it, but it's
interesting. It's not kind of a way that I would have phrased it when thinking about it myself. But it's interesting because Paul, the biggest thing about the album that kind of really changes it all up is having Paul Garrett as the producer of the album.
And the arranger, I think.
Yeah. So, and he works closely with Henry already. They've known each other for a long time, and they are constantly working on things all the time. So that was great I had never met Paul before, I don't think anyway. And the whole idea of the album was, rather than just put on an album of the show, it was going, well, if we're going to do it, let's experiment, let's see what the album can give us that we haven't yet got. So there's far less dialogue. Some of the songs are slightly altered, as you'd imagine. And going, well, rather than, it's not just capturing what we did in 2017. That's not the idea of the album at all. It's going, so here's the idea of Quentin. Here's the idea of this Quentin Dentin Show. Here's where it started. Here's actually what we're trying to do with that, what the purpose of the show is. And saying, if we're going to take this down and have it so that people can listen to it at home and have that experience, let's make sure that the listener gets that experience, that they're the focus, not the audience that we had in 2017 sitting there.
Forward-looking rather than backward-looking, essentially.
Absolutely.
I think, yes.
And that brings, in and of itself, for Henry, loads of ideas and loads of things of, okay, well actually, should Quentin show himself again? What does that actually mean? And things like that. So the album itself is kind of like another production of the show, and it's focusing on that audience member listening to it. And so there are bits of the album that talks to the listener, and making no bones about it. It's not, oh, I wonder if they're talking to me. it's talking to the listener.
You might as well just be tapping the microphone and saying, "Listen up, buddy."
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And at the very end, as you'll know, having listened to it, we talk to the listener, and at the start. So, and those things happened while we were recording, right? That wasn't necessarily it probably was an idea. It wasn't something that I came to it with, because that's again not it's Henry's show. And Henry and Paul just had a great way of figuring out how we're going to put this down so that it's something new. It's an album in and of itself.
What I love about the album is, I think if you know the Quentin Dentin Show or you've seen it already, it is a fantastic. It's really wonderful. It's a record of that as a show, as an idea, as it all came flooding back to me. Not that it ever goes very far away, I must say. The Quentin Dentin Show. I've lived it and loved it for 3 years from my own slightly distant position, but I feel connected to it in a very real way.
True.
But it's so I think it's fantastic for people who have heard it. But I think it, and I can't say this, but it seems to me also to be cleverly focused in a way that it works in its own right for people who don't know the Quentin Dentin Show. And let's be honest, most of us know, those of us who love musical theatre have picked up an awful lot of shows from their cast recordings rather than ever seeing them. The chances of me ever seeing a George Gershwin show that isn't Lady Be Good, which is about the only one that ever gets revived, which is lovely, by the way, but it's minimal. But I can listen to recordings of it and get a sense of it, and actually that's how I fell in love with Gershwin in my youth anyway. And same with Gilbert and Sullivan. I mean, you can see Gilbert and Sullivans all the time, but I got to them first through the albums. So many of the shows I love, I get through the albums. A lot of shows that are coming out of contemporary shows coming out of America now. Title of show. I remember when it arrived, and Putnam County, the spelling of it, they both came over as albums before anyone saw them in this country, and that was the word of mouth. People saying, "Have you heard this show?" Yeah. That's still how many of us engage with musical theatre.
Well, I would say most as well, because I didn't grow up in London.
No,
I didn't grow up next to a theatre scene. I didn't grow up in New York or Chicago or anything like that. So that was it. Movie musicals or the albums were the things.
Was there?
That's how I know most of the shows that I know. Unfortunately, I live here now, so I can go and see shows. But to have, and a good cast album from one where it's one where you see the show and you go, that's what it's about. But for Quentin, the people that love Quentin.
They do,
and that's great. And hopefully, that many more people, having listened to the album, will feel that way. But you can't expect that everyone will know each nuance. And if they saw Quentin and they go, "Oh, I saw that show in Edinburgh. Oh, let me click on this. Let me download this onto my iTunes, onto my Spotify." Oh yeah, but here's a whole experience in and of itself.
Yes, and I think that is its great success. It works in both camps, but it is a great stepping on point for Quentin, for people who want to find out what Quentin is who don't already know.
Yeah,
I'm hoping some of our listeners here on Musical Talk will feel that way, because we've spoken about it a lot, and this is a fantastic and easy way of finding out.
Yeah.
Now, and I think it also sort of sets out its stall quite early on as well, because it is, as we said earlier in the previous interview, I think the second track, which is the Quentin Dentin Show, the Manifesto title song. The first track on the album is a kind of collage of radio static, which is, if you realise it, plot relevant, and certainly helps. It just gives enough hints to what you're listening to later on, I think, to allow you to work out what the arc of the story being told, because there is a story being told in the audio recording, in the album, and that's what I like about it. So, but that also backstepping means there must be some thought that went into that, and we've discussed that. But I do like the fact it's directed; it's not just a laying down of songs.
No, and there's an element of it as well where the title track, the Quentin Dentin Show, starts with all these sirens and kind of brings you into a world. It's all about having this sonic soundscape going on, that you are, in the same way that when we're putting on the show, we're looking at movement, we're looking at the set, we're looking at the costumes, so that you feel like you're in this world. But you don't have all those benefits when you're listening to an album.
No.
So then
the visual is gone, essentially.
Yeah, what we have for the album is that we have Paul. And Paul is very good at what he does.
He's a soundscaper.
Yeah, and he can create these things and change things up in a way that we obviously could never do. It's not just that we're being impeded because we don't have the costume and everything like that. We can do lots more. He can do lots more. I would have no idea. But he can do lots more because he's able to play and manipulate it and work it so that he can create this world that's satisfying for an audience. That you can both know the show and then relive the show and experience it and get new things from it. You can not know the show but be really interested in musical theatre and new musical writing, or you can just like really good songs.
Indeed.
and just listen to them, because Henry's written a great score and Paul's produced great music.
I think Henry and Paul together are an octopus, by which I mean they have so many feet because they're all in lots of different camps.
Yeah.
Because in a strange way, it covers so many different things. At one level, quite a reductive level, I suppose, in terms of the way I'm describing it, you could argue that it's also at least nodding back to its original position of Henry as rock singer.
Yeah.
Because it works as a pop album, not just a show album. And I think that's Paul's sort of cutting edge arrangements and things like that. But there is, it has all the advantages of musical theatre and intelligent lyrics beautifully performed at the forefront for narrative purposes. I.e., it's not subservient to the music, but it has a rock vibe to it, or a pop vibe to it that makes it feel absolutely cutting edge and contemporary. I would obviously need to stress here, I'm a middle-aged man, and so what I actually understand to be contemporary may be wrong, but certainly to my jaded old man's ears, that seems to be the case. I'd also say it works really well if you're listening to it on earphones, because the Quentin Dentin Show, that the first sung number, your first number, is, as you say, there are sirens and things like that, but also it's an oddly entrancing, and trance might be the kind of music as well, also certainly the arrangement-wise. There's something to the orchestration which is incredibly pleasing to my melody-loving ears, if you understand. I'm like anyone else, I enjoy a bit of abstract music, modern classical music. You have to, if you like modern classical music. Yeah. But I do like the. I'm just going to use the word sweetness of sound, which seems so alien in the Quentin Dentin world, but there is something about it which is entrancing. I'm back to that again. So, but you're quite right, there's also things which cannot be done in the theatre. The very fast line on that is almost, you're singing the song, and then the very last word is, I would describe it as the as the reel-to-reel being slowed down. Obviously, it's not that; it's all done electronically.
Yeah, it's all warped.
Yeah, but that's right. It's a warping of the sound, which you simply couldn't do. You'd have to go la 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 woo. You do it orally in a live performance, and it would look a little lame.
Sure.
Whereas it sounds stark. And abrupt and sit-up making, and so the album still has the sit-up making aspects which infuse the show on stage, I think.
100%. And one of the fun things for me is that, as I said to you earlier, I've never seen the show.
Yes, this is your way.
And I didn't know that was going to be because just in terms of a little bit of nerdy music.
I mean,
when we
nerdy music.
When we were doing the recording, rhythmically, we were changing things. So I got there and I was in Paul's studio. Lovely, great, having a great time as well, just really shooting the you-know-what.
Yes.
And just really enjoying ourselves, chatting away. Lovely, Cook's albums on the wall and all that. I was like, this is fun. So he then goes, right, we're changing these things up. Let's just go for it. Sing it the way that you know to do it. Great, now we have that. Now we can play. And so the very last phrase of that song was the rhythm was going to change anyway, in a way that I really liked. I thought, oh, that's clever. Yeah. Great, let's do that. And then I'm listening to the album, for the first time that I got to, and it comes to that end and go, oh, I wonder how this new rhythm is going to play out. And it's something completely different that Paul did. And it could be, I haven't spoken to him about it, but it could be that the reason he wanted the rhythm there was because it meant that he could warp this in a particular way, or he was working, because he works very, very hard and on these things. That then he goes, oh, I could, here we go.
Because it's post-production as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's the point. And you can do things in post-production which you can't do speech marks live, or he set up options. So it's interesting what you said there. Did you do more than one take? You must have done, I'm guessing. Yeah. But it sounds to me like you did what might be called the standard first position take. We've got that, now let's play.
Yeah.
Then allows you to do that. So
yeah, myself and Paul had fun with that as well, because I as I say, I didn't know Paul beforehand. And we got there and we were going through, and he would tell me, because we got through things quite quickly, because obviously I've been doing the show for a long time. I know the music. And we go through and he would go, right, that's great, you've done it now. That's that done. You did everything right. Everything is where it's supposed to be. Now you don't need to worry about that, and we can just start playing. So again, kind of like when you're talking about not being any wrong choices or anything like that. Going, let's see if we can ratchet this up. We're not in a theatre. You don't have the audience to play with. We're in this studio,
which is a freeing environment rather than rather than a closing down one. Yes,
absolutely. And getting yourself to go, well, I can just throw whatever I want at this. He's the one who knows what he's going to do with it afterwards, and great. So that's what the recording sessions, when I think about them now, that's really what we were having fun doing. We were in our little laboratory just playing around.
So, and it's creativity again, isn't it? But it's once again a different form of collaboration, or different people wanting slightly different things from the outcome. But you're playing with it, Paul's playing with it, Henry's playing with it, and then it can be subsequently played with again after the recording.
Yeah.
So, actually they could presumably cut 3 or 4 different versions of the same album from the recorded material, should they wish to do so.
Absolutely. I would imagine, because I then, listening to the album, would go, we did another take of that, and just to try something, and that's made its way in. Fantastic. Great. In the same way that you would do, we're talking about audience interaction in the live show, it changes the way things go, and then you realise something's crept into the show that wasn't there beforehand. This was that same, we're playing around in the studio, and then why not just change this, just you have some free time just to go wherever you want. We're going to keep it rolling. You can hear the track, just sing whatever you want on it. And if we can take those bits and they fit in, fantastic. It gives a different feel.
But I want to explore a little bit also there may not have been any difficulties, and it may be, let me ask you a side question first and then we'll step into it.
Okay.
You are now so immersed in the Quentin character, but as I've said before, I have seen you be interviewed and answer questions in the Quentin character.
You have indeed.
And that's beyond script. You're now thinking like him and talking like him when you need to do so. Mm-hmm. So you've almost escaped. You can tap into his personality when you need to. First, is that easy? Is that now hard? Has it just become such a natural hand in glove relationship?
Yes.
Are you symbiotically linked?
Well, I don't know about that. Yes. I do love that kind of. I do love improv in general, so I do really enjoy that. I get a great kick out of it. I love nothing more than being on stage when everything balls up, and you just and you have to do it. And that, I find that really exciting. And quite often when I do other things, and I did a tour recently, and so whenever it was audience interaction, it'll be okay. Look out you go, because I really do enjoy it. I really do love having to be on, playing straight in, nothing scripted. I would either prefer, in terms of a rehearsal, I've said it loads of times, I'd either prefer to be very, very well rehearsed, know exactly what I'm doing, or absolutely nothing. A halfway point is the worst thing in the world, because then you just feel a little bit unsure of what you're supposed to do. So
you're a surfer in that sense, aren't you? Then
it's great. It's just because you don't know what's going to happen, and your mind's going a million miles an hour. So that would be always a thing that is really, really fun, and I don't think I answered your question.
Well, you did, because I was talking about the fact that you were able to ad-lib as Quentin, so you've escaped the printed word, I suppose is what I'm going to say, which then takes us back to the album recording. Because earlier on we were talking about how so much of Quentin is also his physicality.
Yes.
But of course in an album recording environment, a studio, as they're called, I've noticed, it took me a second, you are free of it. I assume you weren't wearing the white suit. I'm sure you were wearing...
I wasn't, no.
No, you were wearing Luke Clobber.
I was.
And obviously you're free of having to do any of the physical speech marks, choreography, or at least the movement feelings. Mm-hmm. So finding Quentin in a different environment to where you have previously found him, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah.
Was that difficult? But bearing in mind you've also now connected with him so profoundly.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Maybe not.
Because any of those things as well, I'm conscious that because it's the Quentin Dentin Show and I'm playing Quentin Dentin, have played Quentin Dentin for a long time, that it's... And so a lot of me is in Quentin Dentin, because was involved in developing the show. It's still Henry's show, and Henry wrote it, and he has... So I'm very conscious of making sure that before doing anything like that I would check in with Henry. Now, I don't think it's unfair to say, or I hope it's not, that Henry also believes that I know the show well.
He has told me that you are Quentin Dentin.
Well, that's good.
He was very generous in that sense. He put it on the record that the torch has been passed on.
Oh, that's good. That's great. Yeah. And so then when it comes to doing new things, what was fun about the recording, and also we were speaking previously about the idea of putting on the makeup, putting on the hair, the accent as well. Quentin is very different to me. I don't think you'll get us confused very easily.
No.
But that accent is very specific, and it was, and you know, I did take a lot, I did take pains to make sure that it was a specific thing, so that makes it easier to going in. Also, I would, in the studio with the microphone in front of me, strike the kind of Quentin pose with the hands clasped and legs straight and hip width apart, and a big smile.
I'm about to teach you a lesson kind of look. Yeah.
That kind of thing, and the smug, arrogant grin. And so those things, you would go into just to make sure, because you're doing, you have to do so much to get these things to happen. But, in terms of you want to sing the song well and on point and as Henry wrote it. But then going, well, I want to make sure that if I'm trying anything new, that it's coming from the same place. Because obviously with the show, when the show is a live show, it changes, not everything written on the page is what happens on, everything that's written on the page does happen, but other things happen too. So it's just about making sure that you feel comfortable and in the pocket with the character. And so, I do feel, I feel like I have enough control over it that I can improvise and play around. And that was important when we were doing the show, because if you're going to be playing with audience and the audience says something to you, I'm not one to shy away from it. Yes. What I do find difficult though, and I remember when we were doing that Q&A that you were there for, when I was in character, asked Quentin to do a Q&A, and I've done a couple of interviews in character.
This is the one recently for the launch, because when I interviewed you after a show last year, you were Luke, but you're talking about when I observed you as an audience member being interviewed as Quentin.
Quentin.
Sorry, forgive me. Just to clarify.
No, that's fine. And what I do find is that there are jokes or things that I would, as Luke, say and enjoy very much, that I have to catch myself in the moment to go, no. That is
de-Luking your Quentin.
Just kind of, and that's just your mind kind of trying not to lose the run of itself, because there are jokes that you could say that might be funny, but actually don't work with the character that you're then playing. So it's a fun challenge, and I enjoy it very much. The character is very close, and so whenever we have to do little things, whatever they might be, over the last couple of years, it does feel quite normal almost. It's probably the wrong word, but quite comfortable getting back into it. I feel quite at home.
It's not a lurch.
No, and it's nice, and it's very different. I think that's the thing. It's not me, and that is easier than if it was if it was more me than it wasn't.
Yes.
That would be more difficult.
He's not a hybrid, is he?
No.
Thankfully.
Yeah, thank God.
So let's talk about some of the songs on the album. It is ultimately a pop/rock album, but I think that one of Henry's many strengths is that he is able to interpolate lots of musical styles and give them the rock/pop feeling. So for exactly Who's That Man, which is a relatively new song, I think for the 17 iteration, to my ear sounds like an old English folk tune. Dum, 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 that kind of thing. It's obviously much more than that, but it has at least that resonance, that feeling. And that's very different from the song immediately beforehand, which is the Quentin Dentin Show, which we were talking about, was almost manifesto anthem, here's what I want song kind of thing. So you've got this kind of mysterious, it's a kind of early introduction character to the character song in an old English style, with lots of different tempo changes as well. It's not simple in a way that an old English folk song would be. I've made a big meal of that, but that's a good example of the complexity of the song, even though it comes out so smoothly. Your performance, the way it's written, everything about it is beautiful, both in the live on stage and in this album.
Thank you. Yeah. It's fun, and that's one of the joys of doing this show as well, because every time there's a new song coming from Henry for the show, it has a completely different stroke to it, and it has a completely different place that it's coming from. So that's really fun for me. The idea of that Who's That Man starts off very ethereal is sort of the word that I want to use, but it's that kind of and it's very light, and it's kind of you're intrigued as to what's going to happen.
I can imagine somebody bouncing over a hill with a fife or something, singing it. Yes.
So it has that, and then it hits in, and you see how he's married those two things together. So it's always about keeping people slightly
discombobulated.
off kilter.
Yeah,
and
off
then
kilter,
hitting
very
them. So
possibly literally. Yes.
well, you never know. It depends if they need to be woken up or not. But that's one of the joys. So a song like that, where you have different musical styles going in, but also it's the soundscape of the whole thing has this sort of 80s rock pop feel where everything fits in very well. It's all kind of
there's no
honed
handbrake
in.
turn or anything.
No, but it's there's precision in the production that is very satisfying and very of its own, not of its own genre, but of a genre, where it doesn't feel completely separate from other things, even though musically they're quite a way apart. They fit in the same world because that's what the show is that's what the album is creating, this world of sound that all these different elements can fit into and still feel like you're listening to the same thing, same album.
Well, you're right, it's cohesive in that sense, even though it's cohesive but not samey, I suppose, is where we're actually heading, isn't it?
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be dull if it was samey? There are so many other songs which do lots of other, there's a song that to my mind is a little bit March of the Modsy kind of, March of the Mods kind of feel. And there's some sort of squelchy. I don't have the terminology or the lexicon to describe the arrangements that go with them.
Okay.
But there's kind of sort of squelchy, and sometimes almost deliberately lumpen. Kind of sort of backing to one or two of the tracks.
Yeah.
And then you've got totally different things again. Let's touch on the rock number, which is the hard truths number, the Blame Game.
Blame Game, yep.
Which is your tongue twister song.
Very
but
true.
Once again, keeps changing because there are bits in the middle.
Yeah.
And on the recording, ends abruptly for good plot reasons, I think, to be brutal.
Yeah.
In that one, I think, funny enough, that's although there's such a lot going on in that as there was on stage, just audio-wise, there's a lot happening. I think it's going to be, sadly, easy for people to miss the fact that you're giving a virtuoso singing performance. But because you're singing in a different style to the way you have been. You've got a cod American accent, just enough. It's Quentin doing a cod American accent, so it's not just an American accent. It is a character giving something of his American, but you do give it a couple of whoops. There's a kind of Jerry Lee Lewis moment where I can't do it, so I can't emulate it for you to remind you what you've done, but you know what I'm talking about. And you've just got there's enough of a twang in the accent. Everything about it is it's so fantastic that actually it makes me want to see it on stage again. I suppose the boring question to come out of that long spiel is, how, once again, complex songs, complex performance, sounding really simple and easy and wonderful.
Yeah.
How much perspiration goes into that?
As you know well from seeing the show on many occasions.
Literally.
There is that, and that's the thing. It's making things that are complex look and sound easy. And that is a big thing where you go, it's great, it's a great badge of honour to wear, where people go, you must be having just the best time up there. Which is not untrue. I was having a great time, I was having a great time recording it, and I hope people have a great time listening to it, but it's about you having a great time listening to it. It's not just me going, la la la, la la la. There is a lot of things happening, and that song is complex and difficult and has lots of jumps to it in terms of style and just the score is very rangy. I didn't help that by...
Rangy is such a good word.
I didn't help that by telling Henry, wouldn't it be fun if I did this in earlier development of the show, wouldn't it be fun if I did that? And then suddenly you find yourself a year later going, I have to do that 8 times a week? I have to do that twice today.
Thank you.
Great. So there is that, but that's when do you get an opportunity where you can really do that? And the show is different stylistically, is very stylistically, but it's also in large part different stylistically to the way that I would normally be singing. I say normally, I've been doing the show for so long, but previously that I would have really thought were my strong suits.
Well, you started in the choir tradition, didn't you?
Yeah, choir, classical music and things like that, but also kind of more traditional musical theatre or that, which, Quentin doesn't, it has
it's
very
contemporary
few and far
musical
between
theatre. Not contemporary.
moments.
Not traditional, yeah.
No, it's very contemporary, and it does have that rock edge and that kind of 80s pop edge as well. And so a song like Blame Game just is, when to look at it and to be given that in rehearsals is one of those things that you go, oh, this is great and terrifying.
Yes.
Because we have to do it.
Yes.
It's a great idea, Henry.
There is
Thank
an
you so much.
execution in this,
Now we
yes.
have to figure out how it happens.
But I do want to praise your ability to sing, because it sounds so natural. But that you are singing differently in that song to how you are singing elsewhere. Is singing in an accent an easy thing? Is it an intellectual exercise, or did you have to?
It's not really, because for Quentin, doing the accent, which is specific for Quentin, isn't that because it is specific and it's not the way that I sound. It doesn't. There are no bits of it that really sound like me. You just get used to doing that, and so that is very much the character. I would feel ridiculous singing anything from Quentin or doing anything from Quentin as myself, because it's specific to itself. Therefore, that song was one of the most recent songs that I then had to learn for Quentin, so I'd already been doing it for a while, so I did feel comfortable in what Quentin was about and how he sounded and how he did things. Therefore, when the song comes about in the middle of the album, middle of the show, you're already on the route.
Yeah.
You're already going through, you're in the middle of the show.
The direction of travel is already established.
Yeah,
isn't it?
and so it's Quentin doing this thing. So if there are Americanisms in there, or if there are, a little drop of this, a little drop of that, that is it's almost it would be like me thinking of me doing it as me, but I'm starting from another point. The song starts, it's led in with this accent, it's led in with that, heightened RP, and therefore any Americanisms just kind of fall in with that, rather than me worrying about it going backwards to go forwards or anything like that, if that makes sense.
No, it
It's
does.
probably very convoluted.
Let's talk about a totally different feel then, because there's a very short song which leads into Goldie's song to you.
Yep.
Which is on the album, but it's your moment of crisis point, if you like.
Yeah.
Once again, beautifully done. The tune is from earlier on, so it's integrated score in that sense.
Yep.
But that is certainly on the album, I think, the moment where we see Quentin's vulnerability at its greatest.
Yeah.
Short, sweet, and perfect.
That's the idea, anyway. Yeah.
But once again, we were talking earlier about that ability to find the poignancy, and it's interesting because actually it's an extra beat, it's an extra layer, it's an extra flavour to the album. As we who are exploring the album from scratch get to that point, we suddenly realise, oh look, here's more of the arc of the story being presented to us as well. So the profile of the album works really well.
And that's great to hear, because that's what we're going for. But musically, in terms of that song as well, obviously there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek, there's a lot of kind of acerbic wit in what Henry writes. So that we used to affectionately refer to when we were doing the show as Quentin's Judy Garland at the Palladium moment, because it is just sitting on the front of the stage lamenting. So it has all of those things, but it also has this other element of
artificiality to it as well. Yes, I mean, that's the great thing about Quentin, though, isn't it?
Because he couldn't do it any other way.
No.
That's the point. It's not saying that it's untrue. It's just that his very being is show.
It is a look at me emotional moment.
Yeah, and so it has a big sigh, and it's ready to go, and then we go off, and then we kick in again. Classic Carpenter move of, let's go down this route, and then here we go. Now we have a fabulous female vocal performance as Goldie coming in and
practically giving us a Bond theme.
Absolutely,
certainly on the introduction. But once again, it turns on the sixpence, which is lovely, but cohesively. But I do like that gentle performance from you as well. So we do get the flavours, but the profile of the album, whilst it broadly reflects the profile of the narrative of the stage show, has different beats, it has slightly different flavours. And I think that's one of the ones that works very successfully. We were talking about electronic tricks and things that can be done in post-production as well. presumably the backing was recorded and you were once again overlaying it.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't done as you were. Yes. So were you surprised when you discovered that some of the arrangements are vastly different to what you might have been expecting? Because it just has a totally different feel, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and I think definitely Paul did other work to it after everything, because you can't just assume that it's just going to be, I'll put my vocal line at the end just to,
Thank you very much.
put a bow on it.
And then we all went home.
Yeah. So then obviously that's when the guys did their work, and great that they did. What was funny is that it was very different. That there were elements of it that sounded, vastly different to what I was necessarily expecting, or what I had in my head of Henry playing the piano, or when I heard a song, and it creates a lot of joy as well, because it adds to it. It's not that the Hannah, as the producer of the show, found a producer to produce the album who was completely outside and was just going to put down the tracks and do some fancy fiddly things with it, and it sounds great, here you go. By having the relationship between Henry and Paul, and having Paul be interested in the show, and having seen it many as well, I think he saw it before I was involved in it as well, actually. I think he saw Henry in it. That meant that he wasn't just coming at it from a perspective of what could we get that would just sound cool. It was going sound cool because it works in the show and the album.
Yes. Well, he's part of the wider Quentin family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. And is a great creative himself in terms of theatre, but not only in terms of music, in terms of understanding story, in terms of understanding theatricality, in terms of writing music for the stage as well himself. So you have all of those benefits, and they can't in any way detract. I don't think there's a way that they could possibly detract when you're putting down this album that is not just capturing a show that's already been done, but trying to move everything forward as well.
So I can't have any conversation about Quentin Dentin without mentioning my favourite song, which is Numbers.
Yes.
I'm delighted by the way that you've retained possibly my favourite thing that happens in the entire show. It's just that total throwaway. It's when you as Quentin start singing Numbers, and you go, Numbers. It's I haven't done this quite right. I'm going to get it right because it's really important that I get it right. And it's just, it's numbers. Numbers is how it must be written on the stage or whatever, on the paperwork or whatever. But I love that performance. You've done it in previous iterations, but it absolutely works. And we haven't even got into the song yet. That's an acting moment.
Yeah, it's a little cheeky sort of nod where you go, the also in terms of the character, in terms of the arc of the story, there are little chinks forming the armour in any case. Before this is kind of, and now I'm going to try another thing for you guys to understand that you have to get on board with this, as the the couple or as the audience need to get involved with my program.
With that rising anxiety that actually I'm running out of things from my arsenal.
Yeah, and that's kind of in terms of tempering Quentin. That's the difficulty of the performance. It's not peaking too high, because you have to go up higher, and you will kill yourself if you're as dogged as I can get. But those little things, little breaths, little things that the guys allowed me to keep in as well, which is great. That's wonderful, because what would be awful is if the album felt sort of sanitized in any way.
Oh no, it doesn't.
And it doesn't. It feels like everything's working in tandem with each other, so it's tight, but it's still its thing. And Quentin is still weird and still never necessarily wants to be in the mainstream. It always needs to have that little bit of...
Well, it's got cult written all over it.
Yeah.
But the recording still has the edge of the Quentin Dentin Show, which is, I think, wonderful thing to find still transposed and therefore presumably actually run through the core of the show in all its iterations.
Definitely.
I'm sure if you did a radio version of it, in its with dialogue as well, it would still all come out in that sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and this is an amateur's question, but I'm going to ask it. Were the songs recorded in the order that they appear on the album?
No, they weren't. No, they couldn't have been, because I remember we did the middle one last. So no, we kind of, some of it's to do with length in terms of how long it's going to take to record the song, how
long your session is. Yeah.
How long the session is. We did everything in 3 sessions. No, not everything happened in 3 sessions. I recorded my bits in 3 sessions. And we kind of got through it a little bit quicker than you would obviously time for, because you never want to feel like you're under pressure of just, we have to get this down, whatever it comes out with, that's what we're going for.
The electricity's going off in 10 minutes.
Yeah, and so we had lots of wiggle room with that, but we bounced around. So some of the show, we were talking about in terms of the score and vocally what it asks of Quentin. Some of it is also to do with if you're doing a song like Take Your Medicine over and over and over and over and over again, that for me, for other people, if they get the chance to sing it, probably may not be the case, but that's the toughest song for me in the whole show. It's not the highest song in the whole show, it's not the rangiest song in the whole show, just the style of the singing is the most, it takes the most work for me. So if we're doing that again and again and again, which obviously you have to do for a recording because we're trying new things and this element and we're doing whatever needs to be done, then it would be unwise to do that again and again and again and then go, let's do numbers.
Yeah.
And then let's do whatever with just very different things. Which in a
pace
show
yourself as well, haven't you?
Yeah, and in a show it's okay, because in a show you get on that train and you ride it till the end and you just keep on going through.
Yeah.
Because you're only doing everything once. Then when it's the same thing again and again and again is when you can start getting a bit fatigued, or when you need a change up, or where you just need to be trying something else, otherwise it's going to sound too similar because you've gotten yourself into this mindset of I need to get this sound for this song in a score that has lots of different styles to it. Then another song starts sounding stylistically untrue of what it is. So yeah, we played around with what was recorded when.
I suspect it has to be that way, but there's no reason why it should be recorded in order, and indeed television isn't made in that way anymore, so things like that. So it's a perfectly reasonable, understandable production choice, and it hasn't affected the outcome in any way, but I just wondered if it gave you any food for thought in terms of character progression, but you know what the episodes and the songs are, essentially, so you know when to click in. Yeah,
it definitely benefited from the fact that I'd done the show many times before. I'd performed it in its entirety plenty of times to know at this point we're at here. In the same way that, just jumping song to song, you have to kind of go, right, I need to get myself from point A to point B to point C to point D. Well, if I know what D is, I can just come in at D.
Yeah.
Because I'll have lots of freedom and I'm very comfortable in this recording studio to go for it if I feel like actually that's not really where I wasn't at the right point yet, but now that we sung it through, I feel like I know where we are, then we do it again. It's the beauty of having it recorded.
So bringing this to an end, I think the album is a masterpiece, and as we said at the beginning, it's a new iteration of the Quentin Dentin Show. It is a new production of it. It just happens to be an audio-only production of it.
Yeah.
Are you proud of it? Are you pleased with it?
Yeah, I really am, and it's so funny because obviously I'm talking about it a lot now because it comes out in September 14th, but I did my bit for it really before Christmas.
Last year?
So I did it a long time ago, and then the proper album work gets done on it, and they do all their wizardry that I know nothing of.
Clever stuff.
Yeah, all of that. So I was very excited to hear it, because I have a bit of distance.
Yes, of course.
From lots of I've been doing lots of other things, or just life takes you to different things. So to listen to the album was so interesting for me because it is just different than it is its new thing. Yeah. And what's fun and what I've never really had the experience of before, except for filmed things where suddenly an edit comes out and you go, oh that's when okay. But this was going for Quentin, a show that I know really, really well, that I've worked on for a really long time, that someone shows me something different, because otherwise, as we said earlier, Quentin's on stage the whole time, so he never gets to watch anything. This was, go take it away, and then I get to listen to it, and I get to go, oh, so that goes into there because of that, and that's what it sounds like.
You get the audience journey for once rather than the performer's journey.
Absolutely, and it's a way that if the camera was at the back of the theatre when we did it, that would be different, because at no point would Quentin have referred to the camera to bring in that audience member if you're watching it from a little recorded from the back of the stage. Whereas this is, I am the audience because I'm the person listening to it. It's in my earphones
You are now
on the
talking
central
to you.
line, and I get to hear it. And so, yeah, I got to experience the show. So it's fun. That being said, you know, I think most people, most performers, if they see anything or hear anything of themselves, it does take a while to get over the fact that I'm listening to myself. So it was easier to appreciate from an audience point of view songs that other people, you know, places where other people were singing. But then there's great things where you go, oh, that was cool. And, you know, and enjoying the production of it too. There's some stuff on the production that I just, even when I heard the tracks that were laid down for me to sing on top of, that I came bouncing into the studio going, that sounds great. Because there are things that you couldn't have done on the stage that are suddenly in there. And the album just, it's I can start to understand the reception that some people would say after the shows when they saw it, that they just can't get these songs out of their heads or whatever, because I can appreciate it without having to do any work.
Yes, it's plugged in for you, isn't it?
I know, but I mean, I can just listen to the music and go, oh, this is what it's like when I'm not. I can hear the music now, and I can listen to a recording of Shauna or Max and go, oh, and I'm not having to worry about what happens next, or I'm not thinking about, oh, where do I need to stand, or I need to be here to give them that. I can just sit back and.
So when the song Holiday ends, it's not a trigger point for you.
No, exactly.
Anymore.
And I can just, you know, I can listen to the blame game rather than going, which foot is first? What is it? Okay, you know, we're on here, okay, and 5, 6, and here we go. There's none of that, and I can just sit back and really just enjoy what, you know, the fruit of other people's labour as well. Not even, you know, Quentin is, I get to perform him, but, you know, so much work has gone in that has nothing to do with me, and without having the burden of trying to do something that an audience will appreciate so they can appreciate the work that everyone else has done, I get to just go, cool, this is what everyone's done, and I get to appreciate that, if that makes sense. It's kind of, It's a lovely feeling. It's a lovely feeling.
Well, we're delighted to let you in as an audience, to be honest.
I did feel it was a very exclusive club that I was never allowed in.
So, well, thank you so much for talking about the album, because it is a masterpiece, and you've been very self-effacing about the fact that, you know, you are on it, but so many other people have done other things, and of course that's true. But actually, Luke, you have put in a cracking performance. Every song bristles, crackles, is alive with the spirit of Quentin and the spirit of Luke, who brings Quentin to us. So,
thank you very much.
It's a wonderful show. It's a wonderful album, and I've much enjoyed it. And it bears repeated listening. Good. That's the other thing about it. It is not just like we were talking about the show where you engage. It's not a passive show. Mm-hmm. The album is not a passive album. It is an album to live and enjoy again and again. I've been listening to it many times since I was given an early version of it, and I was so privileged to get that copy. But I listened to it on the way today here, and I just beamed I must have looked like a madman on the train. I'm just beaming all the way. I'll probably beam all the way back again. So, as a coder then, you know, we came on this, it's been a wonderful conversation talking to you.
Absolutely.
But we came in on how your career as an actor came to be, and then obviously into Quentin Dentin and the marvellous world of that. But let's finish on, funnily enough, almost a return to form. You are going to be appearing in a Shakespeare song show soon. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so it's a musical review that's going to be on at Above the Arts or Upstairs at the Arts, whatever it's called now. I think it's called Above the Arts now, where we did Quentin in 2016. So
if you know where the Arts Theatre is, you can find the upstairs.
It's upstairs.
Of it. Yes, quite.
And it will just be a kind of one night engagement. Is all it's in for now, and it's great. It's Shakespeare through song, so it's, you know, musical theatre or opera that's based on Shakespeare. So obviously lots of Kiss Me Kate, you know, Romeo and Juliet,
Say No More by Sondheim, that kind of thing from the Frogs.
Yeah, it's not actually, that's not in there, but Something Rotten, you know, and I get to play Shakespeare in it, so I get to do some sonnets, do some
hot beard action.
So and then two couples. And then how they interact just through the song, just drawn together through Shakespeare coming on through. So yeah, that's what's on the cards coming up in September.
And what's it called?
It's called Love, Labour and Loss.
Hey, I like what
I
like what it is you have done there.
Yeah, so
it's Above the Arts. Do you know the date?
It is I want to say, because I know, it's the 16th of September, because it's 2 days after the Quentin Dentin album comes out.
Perfect. So there's a chance for people to see you live in the flesh and to mock
Yeah,
you
if they
there.
want to. Yeah, it's very different. They'll enjoy
Of
that.
course, yeah. But it shows your versatility as an actor. I mean, that's the point.
I hope so, yeah.
Oh, Luke, you're a good actor, and you say to me you can turn your hand to anything and your voice to anything. So,
Thank you very much.
but for today, I'm going to allow your voice to have a little rest, because you've been so generous in talking about
my pleasure.
Your career and the show and the album. I hope that we'll stay in touch. I'll certainly come and see you anytime you're playing Quentin, and pretty much anything else you're doing in London. So
Please,
let me know.
you're more than welcome.
But for the time being, Luke, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Musical talk. And there we are. There's Luke. He really is a remarkable talent and incredibly charming in real life. He gave me so much time and was so friendly. And he makes the hard work that he puts in on stage and, of course, in the recording studio look so light and easy. But, of course, he's a professional, and that's what they do. Quite the talent, Luke Lane. Keep an eye out for him, as Quentin Dentin and in other shows. And, as you heard, he's about to appear in a Shakespearean review. So why not go along to see that? But what of the Quentin Dentin album? Well, it's released on the 14th of September, and the best way of pre-ordering it is to go to the iTunes pre-order website. If you type in the Quentin Dentin Show, that's Dentin, and you type that into the iTunes search bar, you can then click the pre-order button and then get it upon its release on the 14th of September. Only a few days now to go. And then, of course, after that, it'll be released on all good music purchasing and streaming services. And it's the perfect opportunity for anyone to get to know the Quentin Dentin Show, because not everyone had a chance to see it when it was on in Edinburgh or in London in the last few years. I will just say this. Everyone I've taken to see the Quentin Dentin Show has immediately fallen in love with it. It really does have something. So, give the album a whirl. And of course, next week we have another treat, because we're going to be hearing from Henry Carpenter, who was the creator of the Quentin Dentin Show, and his collaborator Paul Garrard, the original drummer with the Kooks and a music producer in his own right. And the two of them will be telling us how they created the Quentin Dentin original cast album. It's an absolutely fascinating insight into an otherwise undiscussed area here on Musical Talk. I can't wait. I hope you can't wait either. Which is disappointing for us all, because we're just going to have to. Well, I don't propose to sit here nattering away for the week whilst we wait for that episode to come along, so I'm going to bring this episode to an end. And it's going to come as no surprise to you that I use the traditional word. I'm building up to it now. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk edited and presented by Thos. Copyright Musical Talk 2018. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk and listen to past episodes, go along to our website www.musicaltalk.co.uk or subscribe to us on iTunes and follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Musical Talk Thos.
But this is one I think of Henry's many strengths. I said that sentence again and get it right. But I think one of Henry's many strengths are... I've got it all wrong. Let me start. But I think that one of Henry's many strengths is